Okay, take three because I can barely talk. I guess that's why maybe I should have guests on this podcast a little bit more often. Because when I do, I seem to have a little bit more verbal discipline for whatever reason. But anyway, today I'm going to start talking about an album that shaped modern underground rock. If you want to hear some raw garage fuzz guitar riffs, this is a place you can look. I'm talking about the 2008 Ty Segall album. It's where he officially stepped into the spotlight with his self titled debut. It's loud, it's messy, it's short, and it's the spark that lit one of the most relentless creative streaks in garage rock. And I've got to be honest, it'll sound like a bad review when I say this, but I don't really remember the individual tracks of this album. It's almost like a type of junk food, which is a little bit how punk rock feels in general sometimes. You put on one of those albums and it's just fast music, and sometimes the songs go by in a blur, and if you're not paying attention, you don't know how to distinguish one from the other. Well, that's kind of the effect that this album had on me, and I love the fuzzy guitar stuff and all that kind of stuff like that. That's what helped inspire me to pick up the guitar. But I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna have to like listen to this album again at some point to just let the songs better sink in. But let's set the scene and put this in context. It's San Francisco, mid 2000s. The local scene is still tight. You've got garage bands, punk nights, beer soaked basement shows, and at the center of it all, John Dwyer. You might know him from the OCs or Coach Whips. Around this time, he's basically the mayor of the Bay Area Underground. According according to what I've read, he was always on a bike, always at a show, probably handing you a taco and whatnot. That's actually how Ty Segall referred to him when he was talking about the man. So Ty Segall moves to San Francisco in 2005 and instantly gets hooked. He's been grinding in some underground bands, but by 2008, Dwyer spots something in him, a sort of spark, and decides to release Ty's first solo album on his label called Castle Face Records. And, that's a key moment in the rock music of this time in that little corner of the world. The record's called Ty Segall, as you might have imagined. Just his name, no gimmicks, no polish. 24 minutes of raw, fuzzy garage punk chaos. It was released on December 9th, 2008. Castleface pressed it, and a little, I guess, additional album or record label called Burger Records did a cassette run of the album. And it's one of those things where blink and you'll miss it if you listen to the album. Like I said, it reminds me of some of the punk rock EPs, like TSOL's EPs. It's a it's like a tornado that just sweeps through your eardrums, and if you're not paying attention, you're gonna be like, "What happened?" So it's been called a lo-fi jumble of yelps and hiss and choppy guitar chords, and that's exactly why it rules. This is like proto-Ty, you might say, the sound before the sound. You can hear the energy that'll eventually fuel albums like Melted and Manipulator, but here it's still pure instinct. You got fuzz pedals cranked, vocals half buried in static, no frills, just momentum. And in terms of style, the songs are short. Most don't even hit the 2 minute mark, but they come at you fast and they're at least semi memorable, but you're going to have to listen to them multiple times for them to really sink in. That's one of the interesting features of this type of music, really. You've got fuzzy guitars, slashing riffs, and a blown out lo-fi punch that feels like it was recorded straight to tape in a garage with a single mic. It's punk energy fused with garage grit, and it's a sort of energy that I've tried to capture in my recordings sometimes. But I mean, to be honest, I didn't do it so much as a gimmick when I started recording. That was just genuinely how I did things. You know, when first started recording guitar, it was with a tape recorder, not to be all cool and retro, but because I had a tape recorder, and you know, I don't know if that really connects with modern audiences. That it's not always a gimmick, but sometimes it is, but for me back then it wasn't a gimmick, and I loved the sound of distorted guitar. Nowadays I'm more into cleaner guitar sounds than I was back then, but really what got me into music was really this type of stuff that Ty Segall recorded here. Vocally, Ty's got this bratty, carefree snarl. From what I recall, some elements of glam, punk, and I guess you can hear a sort of youthful swagger that I, I guess you could say later morphed into more complex songwriting as he went along. Some bands like the Ramones, even they kind of evolved, even though Joey Ramone said in interviews that he didn't like bands that evolved too much. But even the Ramones evolved, and the same is true of Ty Segall. But if you want to hear the early stuff, check out this album. And that's the thing. For all its roughness, Ty Segall has the bones of everything that came later. The hooks, the drive, the obsession with sound texture. You can still hear some of that on these songs, but it's just more stripped down, or however you want to phrase it, just a little bit more in your face and simple. So by releasing on Castle Face, Ty didn't just put out a record. He sort of entered a scene, and Castle Face was really one of those great underground record companies. It was a label that would become a home for garage and psych revivalists. Suddenly, Ty wasn't just another local guy, he was part of a growing movement, the rebirth of West Coast garage rock. And that's why this record matters, even though it's like a sort of snotty sounding record that seems to be like, oh, I don't care. Who cares what message the band is trying to get across or whatever. That's the kind of attitude that you might think this album has, but it is a little bit more complex than that. It's the debut album, the first step in a long line of solo releases that would make Ty Segall one of the hardest working musicians in modern rock. It's a document of a moment. You've got the late 2000s San Francisco scene, a city that's still buzzing with underground creativity before the tech boom changed everything. And it's the sound of potential. You can literally hear the artist forming. It's rough, imperfect, and that's the point. It's like a primitive album, I suppose you could say, but in a good way. And for fans, it may be like a time capsule. And I love some of Ty Segall's album titles, by the way, like Freedom's Goblin. I love that title. It's it's one of the things that makes his type of music fun. And the DNA of all those future sounds is here in the scrappy 24-minute blast. So if you've never gone back to his roots, go ahead and do it. Put on some headphones, crank it up, and let the fuzz punch you in the gut. And again, you're going to want to listen to it more than once. Maybe take a break in between listens, and you're going to want to, I don't know, maybe branch off and listen to similar music and all that sort of fun stuff. So this album is yet another one that could go on to a playlist of this sort of genre. It would fit into a general punk rock playlist, I'm sure. And listen close, because underneath all that noise, you can hear an artist figuring out what he wants to do in real time. That's what makes this album more than just a debut. It's like a mission statement, or like a sign of what was to come. And it's got the energetic garage riff stuff going on for sure. And that's sometimes all you need to hear. So yeah, check this album out. Maybe you'll remember it on the first listen better than I did. And that's it for today's episode. If you liked this dive into Ty Segall's first album, hit subscribe, hit a like button, whatever you want to do. Make a comment. Try to make it an intelligent comment. It seems like, I hate to sound negative here, but it seems like a lot of comments are just like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Like, you know, try to make something impactful. Like that I'm going to read and say, ah, I didn't think of that before. That's an interesting way to phrase it. So I'm gonna do more deep cuts into cult classics, and of course, more movie and TV show reviews, and more social commentary, and just mixing it all up into a blender. And that's the nature of this podcast. So, keep your amp loud and your head spinning, because we're going to have more music reviews and more of this and more of that. All right. Have a good one.